everyone, this is Nemesis, and today I have something really special for you guys. Due to unforeseen circumstances, this may or may not be my last video on YouTube, my final video, so I thought I would do something really spectacular, something to be remembered by, like go out with the bang. Besides, I wanted to make this video for a very long time, just the circumstances were never in my favor. So the initial goal was to make the best possible PvP guide from a conditionmancer's point of view. This is not going to be just the updated version, just the perfected version of the Fear build that I released 8 months ago. This is going to be the sort of guide that even I would use for myself. With such a high goal in mind, you can understand the reason why it took such a long time to make. It was truly a really difficult and complex process, and I have changed my mind quite a few times in the making of this video. But now it's finally finished, it's ready. I'm going through so many layers in the creation process. I have obtained so much new information that has made me so much more of a better player. And as you can see, I wasn't doing so badly even before. Keep in mind that all of this footage has been recorded while I was doing ranked solo queue, as in tournaments, and at the time I was in top 200, 300 on the European leaderboards. I was actually in all games the lowest ranked player. I'm like 35, 36 I think, and most of them were rank 50 or 60 in PvP. So all of them are experienced players that have double, if not triple, the amount of time spent in a PvP environment, in a competitive environment. I also go up against classes with builds that usually pose a great problem to necromancers, yet I emerge victorious. Even so, now that the guide is almost complete and I have a lot of newfound knowledge and a much better, deeper understanding of the entire PvP system, I look back at this footage and I think to myself, man, I play like crap. I could have killed this guy like 3 times already. So this was just to put into perspective what this video can do for you and what the making of this video has done for me. So while the introduction was underway, you could see in the background that I more or less was killing people. And this is early footage from right after when I made the build, so I was still testing it out. You can perform a lot better with this build than you see displayed. This is just to set the tone. This is sometimes my way of explaining things. Sometimes I feel that it is required to offer an example of the effectiveness before we get to the theoretical part and to the actual build. This is my way of demonstrating that yes, the build does work, and quite well, in fact. But I'm not going to be biased. I'm not going to display only the strengths of the build. I'm not going to showcase only the fights in which I won. I don't always win. In fact, in the first part of the video, which I reserved for a build overview, introduction, strengths, weaknesses of the build, I actually want to talk more about the weaknesses of the build and the weaknesses of a necromancer as a class. It's far more relevant. Besides the obvious circumstances that find me totally unprepared, I think I started really well against Mesmer. I underestimated him and the fight ended really short. There's also the circumstances that simply blow your mind, and there's more or less no counter to what just happened, which is... I thought I would do a compilation with such scenarios, but that's for another time. No, what I want to talk about is actually not related to 1v1s and builds, it's more related to the meta. It's a really complicated idea, so I'll just start at the beginning. So we know that the necromancer is an attrition class. That means that the necromancer needs to achieve victory by outlasting its opponent. So far so good. By being an attrition class, that means we don't really have bursting capabilities, and we don't excel at mobility either. So by bursting I mean something like this. And that wasn't even the full combo, so the one-shotting elementalist is definitely something to watch out for. The keep is yours. And when I say mobility, I don't mean swiftness. I have swiftness, a lot of people have swiftness, that's no big deal. When I say mobility, I mean something that will allow you to disappear instantly outside of reach when the situation doesn't prove favorable. And that's something extremely important. As you can see, the thief didn't really like his odds, so he decided to bail. And there's a really small window of opportunity where you can stop that, and if you miss it, there's nothing you can do about it, and thief leaves to fight another day, probably in the next 5 minutes. Also, elementalists are really good examples of how you can troll. You can actually troll in a 2v1 situation. Just because of the invulnerability effects that simply block damage, and alongside high heal and high mobility, you get to troll people. And yes, I will miss the jump. So we don't have access to any of these wonderful abilities. We are an attrition class, we don't really need them. We achieve victory by outlasting our opponent. Now the question is our attrition good enough to fight 1v1, 1v2, 1v3? We cannot escape, we cannot burst one target down, so we have only one more target to worry about. So is our attrition good enough in a 1v2 situation, in a 1v3 situation, in a 1v5 situation? Does our attrition scale up? That's my question. For our attrition, we have something called Death Shroud. We go into Death Shroud and we have an extra HP bar. That is our attrition and can save us and bring us victory even in unfavorable situation. The entire design of the class was around Death Shroud, so without Death Shroud the Necromancer isn't that strong. But with Death Shroud we have the necessary attrition to fight in a 1v1. The problem is it does not scale when fighting one versus multiple. And since we don't have mobility, we don't have stability, we don't have the opportunity to burst, and we cannot heal as fast as other classes. Even if we win in certain situations, you will end up losing because someone else just showed up. And there are so many circumstances because of the lack of mobility. We can be chasing down someone and again get in a very unfavorable situation in which we simply have absolutely no chance of surviving or escaping. That's a really big issue. And the Death Shroud, since it's a second HP pool, it's either scaled to fight 1v2, 1v3, 1v4 or 1v5. As it stands now, it's scaled to fight 1v1. If it would be scaled to fight something like 1v4, then automatically you would be far too overpowered in a 1v1 situation. So this is a design flaw. To make matters worse, besides all the mobility issues, some classes have access to certain invulnerability skills, immunities, and permanent block skills for a short period of time, which function, in my eyes, much more towards the attrition side than our Death Shroud. Because if you block in a 1v1, then you block in a 1v1. But if you raise your block, even if 100 players were to descend upon the person that is blocking, he would still not die. But if 100 players hit the Necromancer, his Death Shroud is gone. Especially at high level of play, sometimes you are forced to fight on the enemy's terms, and you can only win if the enemy underestimates you. He can kill you once or twice, then he thinks, just another Necromancer, unskilled. No, it's not unskilled, it's the circumstance that puts us in a very unfavorable position, and you have absolutely no counter. There's nothing you can do about it. So this is really, really important. The reason I'm telling you this, the reason I'm showcasing all of these scenarios, is because the only way to not fall victim to such a circumstance is to not be in such a circumstance at all. So the skill level has to be so high that normal PvP engagements are not as hard for the Necromancer, so he can focus more on map awareness and other more important decisions, as in, do I want to go there? Do I want to pursue someone? Do I want to stay here? How am I going to plan my next few steps so I don't end up in an unfavorable situation? That's the only counter you have to these types of scenarios, and in high-end PvP everyone focus fires. Especially since due to recent modification the Necromancer can really do some damage now. Everyone focuses the Necromancer. Even before the Necromancer was focused, since he cannot survive focus fire. That's the biggest issue. We don't have blink, we don't have stealth, we don't have block, we don't have invulnerability, and our only form of attrition and surviving focus fire does not scale. So you might survive one player, but you're not going to survive two players. Keep in mind everything that I have said, because it is the only way you're ever going to advance through the rankings in the leaderboards. As you can see, everything that I have said has been backed up by a lot of footage, and I have a lot more since I had initially 8 or 9 hours of recorded tournament play. Now that I have made my point, I'm not going to end this introduction on a sad tune, so let's see some more favorable duels, honorable 1v1s against some of the classes that pose a great threat to the Necromancer. According to the community, a lot of people have a really hard time against Spirit Rangers, but they're not that hard to kill. To stomp, that's another matter, but they're not really hard to kill. So I really hope I made my point. I hope you guys understood what I was trying to showcase here. I'm struggling with English. I re-recorded this part like 12 times already just to make a point. So remember, you are an attrition class, you cannot escape, you cannot burst. If you get in an unfavorable situation, you're dead. Unless the people are really bad, but at this high level of play, you're not going to meet really bad people. The Necromancer is the class that gets punished the most by making mistakes. If any other class gets into a very unfavorable situation, they go into stealth, they go misform, they go perma blocking, they charge, they leap, they jump, they do something. The Guardian with his 100 blocks and invulnerability, they have other ways in which they could buy themselves some time until they can correct their mistake or get into a more favorable spot. All of them have this ability except the Necromancer. So as it stands now, this is something you have to consider. If you learn nothing from me except this, then you're already a much better player. So feel free to enjoy the next few duels. If not, you can use the annotation on the bottom to reach the main menu. From there you can easily browse through the entire guide.
Your enemy sees the altar. Rest well, my lord. I am... I'm bleeding. the chieftain! Your enemy picked up an ore!
So this was the build overview. I showcased a bit of the build's strength, I spoke about the weaknesses, and I also provided a proof of concept, both in terms of strengths and weaknesses. Now we are going to take a look at breaking down PvP, which I have discussed in great detail in a previous video. I'm just going to leave an annotation here because it's basically the starting point. After we understand how PvP works, we can go ahead and select our weapons and utilities. Then we move on to traits, items, and we are going to take a look at the finished product. Then I would like to talk a bit about build variation. And the major question is dumbfire or foot in the grave. After that we have the playstyle and also a special category reserved for fear, since it's a major component in the necromancer class, and I believe that maybe in time it will change, so it deserves its own spot. And the next thing we are going to talk about is the thing that I spent a really long time developing. It's condition counters by class. This is the most valuable part of this guide. Also some final notes to wrap things up, and the additional footage is going to come from live streaming in the future if I manage to start live streaming this month. So feel free to come back to this table of content using the annotation on the bottom at any time during the video and choose a different area of interest. So I'm going to assume that you already have a basic understanding of the Guild Wars 2 PvP system. If not, feel free to use the annotation to get back to the main menu and select breaking down PvP. I'm also going to assume that you have a basic understanding of what it means to be a conditionmancer, so I'm not going to explain the class mechanics. There will be, however, an annotation on top of the video that will direct you to the PV conditionmancer, where I have explained in great detail all there is to know about the conditionmancer. So just a quick reminder, we are going to be using an offensive conditionmancer in a PvP environment. That means whatever we are trying to do to the enemy might want to do to us, or the enemy might be prepared for what we are trying to do, and they will have a counter to this. So the objective is to have as much damage as possible, preferably enough damage, and have counters of our own, counter to a counter to a counter. It's all about countering, so the damage can be done. It doesn't matter if you do 1,000,000 damage if you're never going to have a chance to do that 1,000,000 damage. So let's go ahead and choose our weapons. We are going to use the standard weapons for a conditionmancer, which is scepter plus dagger alongside the staff. Scepter, dagger, staff. Going to go through the skills real quick just to make a few points. So we have bleeding plus damage, and poison plus damage. This is basically damage and counter to regeneration. Okay, we have AoE, 2 stacks of bleeding plus AoE cripple and also damage. As you can see, we have bleeding plus counter to mobility. This is damage per condition and also adds life force. This is damage plus blindness, also transfers 3 condition from yourself to the target, bounces 3 times, has a range of 900 and a low cooldown. This is basically, again, defensive offensive tool. This is a very useful skill to counter condition damage. Okay, enfeebling blood. AoE weakness plus damage plus AoE weakness. As you can see in the description, 50% endurance regeneration and 50% fumble unrestricted. The weakness has been recently modified to reduce all incoming power type damage, direct type damage, in half. And it's a huge improvement for the necromancer survivability, and basically cuts the damage, the incoming damage, in half, which is amazing. You're going to see a lot more of the weakness. And again, we have bleeding plus weakness, so offensive plus counter all in one. Okay, moving on to the staff, we have life force generation plus the combo finisher plus damage. Not really that useful, but it's power type damage and can do quite well to stacking life force when you're stuck to this weapon for another 2 or 3 seconds. Okay, we have regeneration plus bleeding plus damage. This is also an AoE, low cooldown. So we have basically the bleeding is offensive and regeneration is defensive. Chill plus poison plus damage. This is also an AoE and a combo field poison. Chilling is a really strong counter both to mobility and to the damage received. Chilling is amazing. Also poison is counter to regeneration and healing in general. And this in combination with the next skill, Putrid Mark, which is damage plus a combo finisher blast, and these two together generate weakness, so second source of weakness. And this also transfers 3 condition from yourself to the target. The tooltip is wrong, the game has been recently modified so it doesn't transfer from ally to enemy, just from yourself to enemies. Last but not least, Fear, AoE Fear, which can be turned into offensive weapon once we get to the traits. This in combination with the Fear from Dash Shroud, we have 2 CCs already. Also in Dash Shroud we have Dark Path, which is damage plus bleeding plus chill plus gets you to the target. Again, offensive, defensive, and this is unblockable, so it's a really useful skill. So now that we finish with the weapons, we can move on to the utility skills. First utility skill will be in the healing slot, and I use consume conditions. Feast on your condition, gain health for each one consumed. Basic healing is 5301. Healing per extra condition on the target is 730. This is a really strong condition removal because it can remove all conditions, and if you remove 5 or 6 conditions, basically, if you remove all conditions, if you remove 7 conditions, basically you double your healing. Also it's sort of at a small cooldown, so this is our third way of countering conditions. So for now, countering condition type damage is more or less shaping up to be really effective. Moving on to the first utility slot, this is where I'm going to introduce a new concept. I will call this concept condition overload. I'm going to be using Signet of Spite. Passively improves power, that's nothing. Inflict bleeding, blindness, cripple, poison, as you can see, a lot of conditions on top of normal damage. I keep saying normal damage, and you guys have to remember that all of the skills that apply bleeding and an extra effect also apply a small amount of power type damage. This is extremely important, as we will find out later. So that's 2 stacks of bleeding, blind, cripple, poison, invulnerability, and weakness. Third source of weakness, second blind, also poison and cripple, which is a counter to mobility, also regeneration and heal. The vulnerability is there just for having an extra condition. We have 6 conditions, and since it's a power type attack as well, we have the chance to apply 7 conditions, as we will find out later on. We will have the chance to occupy 7 slots with conditions, and that is a really major aspect, because normally in order to have all of these conditions on the target, you basically have to use 1 or 2, 3 skills. This encompasses 3 skills all in one, so the chances of dodging or failing is much smaller. But once we get to the condition counters by class, this skill and the concept of condition overload is going to make so much sense, and it's going to really change the gameplay and your way of looking at the PvP design when playing a conditionmancer. So this skill is amazing. It also has a range of 1200 and a 60-second cooldown. I have 48 cooldown because of traits. So amazing skill. Second utility slot, Corrupt Boon, self-poison plus converting 5 boons into condition, range 1200, also unblockable. This is amazing. The fact that it is unblockable really messes with guardians and a lot of classes that rely heavily on blocking. Every time you use Corrupt Boon on stability, you transform it into fear, so they no longer have stability and they have fear instead, and we have 1 fear, 2nd fear, 3rd fear from Dash Shroud. So this is basically our 3rd CC, and if we can turn fear into an offensive tool, not only a CC tool, a control tool, if we can turn it into an offensive tool by adding some damage to it, basically sometimes people use stability on themselves so they have a chance to heal without being interrupted by any form of CC, and you can turn their counter into your counter. Their counter is that they put stability on themselves, they remove the conditions that you put on them, and they try to heal, so they negate everything that you have done. With this soul skill, you can counter their counter. So amazing. I never leave home without it. And also on a 40-second cooldown, not really bad, since 1 fear 40-second cooldown, 2nd fear 40-second cooldown, and this is 20 seconds. So in a 40-second interval, which is basically how long duels last anyway, you have 3 CCs so far. Also counter to a counter, which is really amazing. Okay, 4th utility skill, Spectral Wall. gain life force when taking damage, spectral block for 8 seconds, swiftness 30 seconds, break stun. This is a stun breaker. So we know that sometimes we get stun locked and there's nothing we can do, and that sucks. So you cannot go into a really competitive PvP environment without a stun breaker. You're just as good as dead. The fact that it's on a 48-second cooldown and it gives swiftness for 30 seconds, we are not going to be that slow of a moving target. We still don't have proper mobility, as you guys seen, but still we're not a snail. Also, the life force gain has been recently modified, that if you activate this
Swift and steady.
and you go into Death Shroud, it doesn't, as you can see, it no longer, Death Shroud no longer deactivates, and I teleported back to myself. The Death Shroud no longer negates the effect of gain life force when taking damage, which is simply amazing. Okay, last utility skill, I am going to have the Golem. Basically, Golem does a moderate amount of damage, quite good. 700 damage is quite good. Also the cripple, so basically another counter to mobility. And every 40 seconds you can do damage plus stability for the Golem, and a knockback and a launch. It's a bit buggy sometimes, has a range of 1200, it's a bit buggy like I said, but it's our 4th CC. So if we remember, 1st CC, 2nd CC, corrupt boon on stability, 3rd CC, and this is the 4th CC, all within the same duel. Most duels take up to 40 seconds. If you didn't kill someone in 40 seconds, you're not going to anyway. So the build is shaping up just from the weapons and utilities, but now that we are going to move on to the traits, you will see that we further amplify the effectiveness of the desired playstyle. And desired playstyle is to have enough damage while having a lot of counters to what the enemy can do to you, because like I said, it doesn't matter if you have 1,000,000 damage if you're never going to have a chance to do your 1,000,000 damage. So we need to counter condition damage, we need to counter direct damage, and we need to counter CCs and focus fire. Otherwise we are as good as dead. We also need to counter condition cleansing, but more about that once we get to condition removals by class. Okay, moving on to the traits. So we need to do condition type damage, so all of these skills were not for nothing. So for that we move on to curses. Condition damage increased by passive. We are on the right path. We also have precision. And you ask yourself, why do we have precision? Well, bar precision. Critical hits have 66% chance to cause bleeding, so basically an extra bleed every time you crit. So you need to crit, so you have a chance to apply an extra bleed when you crit. So as you can see, the small amount of direct damage is there just so you crit a bit, so you apply further bleeding, and same goes for absolutely every skill. So 3 stacks of bleeding, potentially 3 stacks of bleeding because of the normal damage. Okay, moving on. Weakening Shroud. Cast Enfeebling Blood when you enter Death Shroud. We remember from the skills that we need to have offensive and a counter to something at the same time, so we live long enough to apply bleeds. And Enfeebling Blood is actually this. 25-second cooldown, AoE, bleeding plus weakness. So this is basically 1, 2, 3, and this is our 4th way of applying weakness. So you see how much counter we have to direct type damage. If you can manage to keep weakness uptime on a power type opponent at all times, basically he will do half damage, which is just mind-blowing. Weakening Shroud also has a 15-second cooldown, and this has a 25-second cooldown. Okay, moving on. We have Terror. Fear deals damage, and it deals an additional 50% damage if the target has another condition on them. So you guys remember that we have potentially 3 fears, all under 40-second cooldown. So the fears are a counter to a lot of things, to getting killed, for the enemy to heal, for the enemy to cleanse, for a lot of things, and this special fear is a counter, a really hard counter. So now, like I promised, like I said, we are going to take it one step further and use the fear as an offensive weapon. So again, it's a double-edged sword. It's not only a form of CC, it's a CC plus damage. There are other classes that have fear, but none of them have fear plus damage included. And once we get to the playstyle and fear, I'm going to showcase how much damage the fear does, and we are going to put it in a combo, and you can see how much damage you can do while the enemy has been countered by CC. Moving on, last two major traits would be Lingering Curse or Withering Precision. Withering Precision apply 5 seconds of weakness on critical hits. This effect can only trigger once every 20 seconds. You don't always crit, and 5 seconds is not that long, and a 20-second cooldown, not that good. We have one weakness, second weakness, third weakness, fourth weakness. We don't really need the fifth weakness. And conditions inflicted by the scepter skills, that's 33% longer. Not all of the time you're going to be using scepter skills. You're going to go into dash route, you're going to use other conditions, other forms of doing damage, staff, CCs, golem. Basically the conditions on the scepter are these two: auto attack or grasping dead. So not really that useful for us, no reason to go further. So where do we go from here? Well, in the past I have said that getting to 25 stacks of conditions in a PvP environment is redundant, it's useless, it's pointless. No one in the right mind is going to allow 25 stacks of bleeding on them, and if they do, they're nubs and they're good as dead anyway. You can kill them with 10 anyway. Most people, most unskilled people, usually use a condition removal once they see 5 conditions on them. Skilled people use a condition removal when they see 10 conditions on them, 10 stacks of bleeding. So you're not going to get 15 stacks of bleeding on a target in most situations anyway, let alone 25. So you don't need the ability to stack 25 stacks of conditions on the target, since you're never going to benefit from that. That investment needs to be directed into something else. Something like burst stacking or condition overloading or CCing or countering or something like that. So we don't need 133% bleeding duration. We need half of that, or maybe even less, because with certain burst stacking capabilities, and I will explain what burst stacking is, it's a new concept. So let's say 50 or 60 condition duration. That would be the logical assumption. So we are going to go after condition duration. That is spite. We have 300 power, not really that useful. Still damage is damage, and the 30% condition duration is really good. So let's move on and see the traits. We have Signet Mastery. Signets recharge 20% faster. Activating a Signet gives you 3 stacks of might for 10 seconds. So we have a Signet that we never leave home without, and it recharges 20% faster. Without this, it puts us at 60 seconds, which is already too long. I want it on a 48-second cooldown. Moving on, we have Chill of Death. Cast Spinal Shivers on a foe when they hit 25% health. This effect can only trigger once every 20 seconds. Doesn't look bad, but what is it? Spinal Shivers is basically chill your target and remove up to 3 bones, deal extra damage based on the number of bones removed, does normal damage, and does chilling for 7 seconds. So that basically gives us, on top of the 1 chill and the 2nd chill from Death Shroud, this is our 3rd chill. So we can have permanent weakness and a really high amount of chill uptime on the target. And also the boon removal. The boon removal can synergize really well with the fact that this removes only 5 boons. Sometimes people cover their boons, they go into 7 boons, 8 boons. If this skill removes 3, with an extra 5 you can always nail that stability. So really put someone in the ground if you combo at the right time in the right way. So as you can see, we have further countering, and the fact that it does power type damage, it may proc some more bleeds and let's say some more other effects. So this is where you will see that the fact we moved into spite, it's not just because it makes so much sense, it's also for this skill. Dumbfire. Inflict burning when you critical hit an enemy. This effect can only trigger once every 10 seconds. Recently this trait has been modified, so it functions differently in PvE and PvP. Basically in PvE the burning that comes from Dumbfire lasts for 4 seconds on a base, so with 100% condition duration or burning duration you can end up with 8 seconds of burning on a 10-second cooldown. In PvP however it has a base of 2 seconds. So at best you can get it to 3 seconds, 3 and a bit if you use a really messed up build, but it's not really worth it. So right about now we would have 20 points left, and the build is looking pretty good from all points of view so far. So the 20 points should be again towards the offensive side, with the note that you need to live long enough so you do your damage. So we know that the Necromancer is an attrition type class and achieves victory most of the time by outlasting its opponent. We don't have high heals, we don't have high mobility, we don't have a lot of blocks on invulnerability effects, stealth, or any of the sorts at this moment in time. We also know that the Necromancer's main source of attrition at this moment in time is the Death Shroud. Death magic, toughness, bone duration, nah. Vitality, healing, nah. Soul Reaping. Critical strike damage, a bit more damage, we have critical strike chance, and we have a bit of power. Nah. Life Force Pool. Life Force Pool is good, yes. So, increase our Life Force Pool by 20% if we use the 20 points here. So it's pretty much a logical choice. Gluttony. Increase Life Force gain from skills by 10%. Okay, what skills give us Life Force? We have Life Force and we have Life Force. So this is nice. We also have more Life Force. So 3 skills that gives us Life Force, and the Life Force pool is bigger, and we have all Life Force that those skills give us is increased by 10%. So Spectral skills charge 20% faster. That's pretty much an obvious choice, since without the 20% this will be 60-second cooldown, and that's just not acceptable. So we need Spectral skills to charge 20% faster. Last gasp. Gain Spectral armor at 50% health, 60-second cooldown. Spectral armor, Spectral armor, Spectral armor. This is Spectral armor. Gain Life Force as you take damage, remove and enter Death Shroud, also applies protection. Let's see now.
I feel good.
The tooltip didn't get updated again, so it doesn't get removed. It doesn't get removed when entering Death Shroud. So as you can see, we have Spectral Walk, which is a stun breaker and gives us Life Force when hit. And we have Spectral Armor for free once we reach 50% health. And these two have been recently modified, and they can stack with each other. So basically you gain Life Force 8% and another 20%, basically 10% every time you get hit, and they work while you are in Death Shroud. So these two combined with Life Transfer can sustain your Death Shroud really high. It's a really strong attrition tool. If only it would scale, that would be really something. Also gives protection and a stun breaker, so second stun breaker, 2 stun breakers. So really not bad for an offensive build, having 2 stun breakers, it's amazing. Last but definitely not least, Fear you inflict lasts 50% longer. 50% with 30% condition duration, that's 80% duration on fear, almost 100%. So this is again a really important major trait. So moving on to the items. So far we have a lot of ways of countering direct damage, we have a lot of ways of countering condition damage, we have CCs and counters to CCs. Let's see how we can improve even more. So for the amulet, I am using the Rabbit amulet. Precision, toughness and condition damage. Condition damage is obvious why. Precision, I have explained why. And toughness, so we get to 2490 armor alongside a lot of weakness. Yields a really good defense versus incoming direct damage, power type damage. Okay, the sigils. I am using Sigil of Superior Geomancy on the Scepter, Sigil of Minor Corruption on the offhand dagger, and Sigil of Superior Geomancy again on my staff. The Sigil of Minor Corruption gives 10 condition damage every time you kill a foe, max 25 stacks. The thing is that every time you kill someone in a PvP environment you get 5 stacks. You only need to kill 5 people to get 250 extra condition damage, which would put you at 1373 condition damage, which is actually not bad at all. The Superior Sigil of Geomancy is extremely important in a PvP environment. For once, it has a cooldown of 9 seconds and it applies AoE bleeding for 7 seconds. What it doesn't say in the description is that it applies 3 stacks of bleeding, also does a moderate amount of power type damage, so it can crit, and we all know what that means. And now for the pièce de résistance, This sigil can activate even if you are disabled. If you are disabled, you can swap weapons and therefore put 3 stacks of bleeding on the target, and you can also go into Death Shroud while you are disabled. So someone stuns you with quite an effective stun, and voila. So really good counter. So as you can see, 6 stacks, 7 stacks with a bit of burning. You can easily use from there a Death Shroud 2 or some auto attacks or grasping that, and we are at around 10 stacks of bleeding, exactly where we want to be. So the final piece of the puzzle, my secret, beyond the Signet of Spite, my secret lies in the runes. Superior Rune of Lisa. We have 2 stun break. We know we have 1 stun break, the 2nd stun break. We don't have any stability. 25 precision, 10% condition duration, that puts us at 40% condition duration. When you use a healing skill, you gain a random boon for 10 seconds. So basically protection and spectral armor, which is more protection. So that's 2 protection alongside high armor and weakness, a lot of weakness. And when you use an elite skill, lose all conditions and gain all boons for 5 seconds. You guys would not believe how many fights I turned around using the golem. Has a 40-second cooldown and basically removes all conditions and gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 boons, Aegis and stability for 5 seconds. 5 seconds stability on a 40-second cooldown. Sometimes it's 45, sometimes it's 40 cooldown. They keep doing stealth buffs or nerfs to this rune, so by the time you watch this video I have no idea what's going to be the value. But basically 5 seconds of stability every 45 seconds, let's say that. So that's a really good amount of stability. And also we know that stun breakers don't remove immobilize, so they might CC you, stun, knockdown, blah blah blah, and you use a stun break and then they immobilize you and they still focus fire you. But having all boons and removing all conditions, you remove stability, you remove weakness, you remove shield, you remove all the bad conditions that are on you, and you get Aegis, protection, third protection mind you, Aegis which blocks 1 skill, and stability for 5 seconds. And since it's on a 45-second cooldown, you can use this to stomp. Sometimes you kill someone, you pull out your golem to prepare for the next fight, you have stability with Aegis, and you stomp that player without any problem. So this is the final version of the build. Everything I use, all my secrets, all my tips, all my tricks. So let's take a look at the final product. So the finished product. Let's see in how many ways we can deal with direct power type damage. So we have 2480 armor, we have 1 protection by healing, 2nd protection when charging, 3rd protection from spectral armor. 3 protections. We have 1 weakness, 2nd weakness,
I feel
3rd weakness from the trait, and 4th weakness from combo field poison and combo finisher blast. So 4 weaknesses. We also have 1 blind, 2nd blind. Let's see in how many ways we can deal with high mobility. So basically a lot of mobility reduction. So we have cripple, 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 1 chill,
I am dead.
2nd chill, and of course 3rd chill. So 3 cripples, 3 chills. Let's see in how many ways we can deal with boons. We have 5 boon removals, and the same skill chill of death, another 3 boon removals. Let's see in how many ways we can deal with conditions. We have transfer 3 condition, also turns it into an offensive weapon. Transfer 3 conditions, also turns it into an offensive weapon. Remove all conditions and remove all conditions. So basically 2 full condition removals, 25 seconds and 40 seconds, and 18 seconds 3 transfer, 25 seconds 3 transfer. So conditions are pretty much covered, also almost 20,000 HP, and the extra HP bar really covers conditions. Okay, Let's see how many stun breakers we have. We have one stun breaker, second stun breaker, basically 2 stun breakers and CC removals, and we also have full clans with stability and aegis and all that good stuff. Let's say 3 ways of dealing with CCs. Okay, let's see how many CCs we have. We have 1 fear, 2nd fear, potentially 3rd fear, and a knockback with a launch that does a lot of damage. So basically 4 CCs, and if you count the immobilize from 20 checkers, that puts us pretty far ahead with about 4.5 CCs. The mobilize is quite long, so it's quite good. So now you can finally see how the entire build comes together and just how beautifully it has been designed to give you all the skills, all the tools required for you to be successful in a competitive PvP environment. So in this chapter I'm not going to talk for a very long time. Simply put, there are some people that would argue that since Downfire has been modified for PvP, it's no longer a worthy investment. It basically reduced its damage in half, so it's not really worth it to be taken anymore. So let's see how much damage it can do. Yeah, 3, I saw them.
Yeah, same.
So as you can see, it ticks 3 times at 40% condition duration for about 600 damage. At 1123 condition damage, you can increase that to around 700-800 at best, but you have to modify your build heavily and it will mess with its synergy. So total of 1000-2000 damage every 10 seconds. So a lot of people will say that that is not really a lot, and they might be right. So the question is here, how do we invest these 10 points into something that is worth the investment? So if you don't want to get that extra 1000 something damage to almost 2000 damage, keep in mind that the burning takes another condition slot which serves the purpose of condition overload and basically protects your bleeds, but more about that later. So another worthy investment instead of these 10 points would be to go soul reaping all the way. So basically bigger life force pool, but more importantly, foot in the grave. Gain stability for 3 seconds when you enter Death Shroud, and you can enter Death Shroud every 10 seconds. So basically 5 seconds of stability every 40 seconds, 45 seconds, and 3 seconds of stability every 10 seconds. And you can enter Death Shrouds, and you can enter Death Shroud 4 times in 40 seconds. That means 17 seconds of stability on a 40-second cycle. Basically in a duel you have up to 17 seconds of stability, which is just mind-blowing as it is. Basically I just solved the Necromancer stability issue. This will also reduce your condition duration by another 10%, which would put you at 30% condition duration. You'll still be able to stack bleeds, a bit not as effective, but it doesn't matter. You have so much weakness, you have so much of everything that basically you have become an attrition class, especially in 1v1 situation. Your attrition still doesn't scale, but with all the stability and the weakness and the blinds and the chills and everything, you can get away from some pretty nasty situations. So this change is going to put you on the safe side of the build. This is basically a little bit more defensive. I personally prefer to play high risk, high reward, so I'm going to stay with this build. Unless I'm stuck in a meta, there are certain times of the month in which everyone seems to go stun locking, and then you definitely need the extra stability. Basically I have given you the alternative, different playstyle, a little bit customized to deal with a stun locking meta when the season for such a meta seems to appear, and there is no way to predict what current mentality the people are going to approach in the time you are going to be watching this video. So keep in mind the small customization that can be done to this build to really put you in a favorable spot. And this build is mostly designed for solo queue, but if you're doing team join at high level of play, a lot of people are going to really focus you down, and since you can coordinate with your team, the damage is not going to be an issue. So if you take Foot in the Grave alongside this, you have two sources of stability on top of Stunbreaker, and if you take, let's say, Well of Power, you have 3 stabilities and 3 Stunbreakers. If you synergize with the Guardian, you'll have a lot more stability. You'll have so much stability that if people try to focus fire you, it's not going to end so well for them, because you can survive long enough to stall the enemy team, and your own team can focus fire them down, kill them, and eventually bring you victory. So it's a mind game, it's going into the meta. So it's beautiful, it's elegant, it's, I dare say, perfect, just because of this customization and everything that the build turned out to be. Now going to move on to the fear and playstyle, because there are a few things that you need to know about fear and the playstyle. Then we are going to transition into condition removals by class, so you absolutely know everything that you need to do. So the fear and playstyle. What you need to know about fear is that traded with terror, it does about 600 damage without a condition on the target, and about 900 damage if extra conditions are present on the target. And I agree, that doesn't seem that much, but that's not how you use fear. I've stated so many times, fear is a counter. Fear is a counter to the enemy's counter. If the enemy tries to heal or remove conditions, a well-placed fear can do so much damage, as you can see. And if you miss the fear, if you fail in that counter of their counter, it's as if you have done nothing at all. That was a bad thing. Now let me demonstrate what it means to not miss the counter of a counter. So first counter to heal plus cleanse, second counter to heal plus cleanse. That was just from Signet of Spite and 2 fears that were placed at the right time where it counts. In case you missed it, let me demonstrate again. So that's small damage, Signet of Spite and a bit of fear at the right time where it counts makes all the difference in the world. And we all know necromancers have a big health pool, so I almost killed the necromancer by Signet of Spite and 2 fears. Another thing that you need to know about fear is that you can manipulate the direction in which the enemy runs away from you. The enemy will always run away in the opposite direction. So if you move, you can set up really nice combos. For example, you are not in a very favorable spot, you move, you put someone into the wall, and you combine that with the golem charge into a wall, and that yields amazing results as well. Okay, combine this with a proper burst stacking combo, with a proper burst stacking damage rotation, and you will achieve the most amazing results. As you can see, a normal standard damage rotation that I use, feel free to use it, puts this target, which has 15,000 HP, into the ground, and I have included 2 counters. This is fucking amazing. It's a pleasure just to watch. I'm definitely going to do some more PvP later on after I'm done with this video. Anyway, the point is you get to 15-16 stacks of bleeding even with our 40 condition duration, just from a proper damaging rotation. And like I said, you can use this and you combine with what you've just learned, you are going to have so many people calling you OP knob, and you're going to have such a great time. Now you guys finally understand what I said about fear and fear build and blah 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 8 months ago. Fear is there to counter the counter. If the enemy gets to cleanse and heal, it's as if you've done nothing. But if you counter at the right time, target is gone. And now you guys will say, but Nemesis, for that we need to know all the classes, we need to play all the classes. It's pretty hard. Yeah, it is pretty hard. But I'm not going to allow my minions to struggle blind. I'm not going to send you out there with the right tools to fight blindly. I've went one step further with this guide. As I've promised, I'm going to make the best PvP guide possible for a conditionmancer. So now we have reached the most important part in this guide, and I feel so good about myself. Okay, condition counters by class, and for that we are going to go outside of the game and look at something that I worked really hard on, because I had to test a lot of them out since wiki and other sources were incomplete or wrong. So let's take a look.